Let's pray together. Jesus, thank you so much for the gift of this moment here in this space with one another. Thank you that you show up and you do things when we gather together like this. We thank you that we will walk away new, we will walk away changed, we will walk away impacted as a result of being together with you and with one another today, and we stand on that today. We're so grateful. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen. Amen. There was this song that we used to sing when I was in Sunday school as a kid. And if you grew up in church, you probably are familiar with this. If you aren't, it's probably better off for you. But the song went like this. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in love. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Anyone heard that song before? And then it went through ears and feet and all kinds of things with that, right? So here's the thing. That song scared the crap out of me as a kid. Because it's slightly passive-aggressive, right? Because it's a bit like, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see, right? And then it's like, because the Father up above is looking down in love, right? And you're like, okay, I got it, clear, right? I'm not going to look at bad things over there because this loving Father is looking down at me, so I need to be careful because he loves me so much in this moment. And the overall message that song brought us was essentially don't do bad things, don't look at bad things. And I think this has actually shaped the focus of much of modern day Christianity, because when they were saying careful little eyes what you see, it was saying be careful about what you put into your eyes, right? So it was essentially like, hey, don't look at porn, don't watch rated R movies, don't read the Book of Mormon, all those type of things, you know? And it was like, be careful about what you put into your eyes. And the problem is that this way of relating to the world leaves us spinning our wheels, trying to behave correctly so that we become good people. And while I think they got the content right in this song, I think they got the context wrong in this side. Because what if God was actually less concerned with what you put into your eyes, and he was actually more concerned with how you saw the world? And how we were careful with how we actually saw the world. Because here's what I know to be true, is that how we see the world actually determines how we live. It determines what's available to us and not available to us. It determines what we're capable of and not capable of. It determines who God is and who God isn't in the middle of this. And how you see the world will determine the experience that you're living in. I mean, this week we had rain. Wasn't it wonderful? But here's the thing, some of you didn't think it was wonderful, did you, right? So there's two people usually with rain. There's the people who are like, I just want to put on my pajamas and go home and sit by a fire. Isn't it so wonderful that it's raining? And then there's the other group that's just like, oh man, it's raining, right? I pay way too much money on rent to have rain right now. And so it's interesting that we can have the exact same circumstance and two different experiences of it. We're a Disney family, and we're at Disneyland like twice a month. And our boys, up until about 6 months ago, would look at rides like Space Mountain or the Matterhorn or Big Thunder Mountain, which are all some of the roller coasters there, and it would be like, absolutely not. That is horrifying. That's a death trap, right? And then one day, Colin just decided, we're doing it. And after that, everything changed. I mean, before it would be like, you guys want to go on Big Thunder Mountain? No. Maybe when I'm 23, I'll go on that, right? And now when we get there, that's all they want to go on, because how they saw the world changed. And in that, it changed their experience of the world. I want to take us to this moment in the scriptures where God has taken his people, known as the Israelites, and he has set them free from almost 400 years of captivity from Egypt. If you know the story, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you've probably heard of the Prince of Egypt. And Moses comes and he sets the people free, and they set out into the wilderness, and they cross this parting of the Red Sea, and now they're wandering through the desert, and they come to the Promised Land. Now, most of us think that they came to the Promised Land 40 years later after they've wandered through the desert. What we don't realize is that he actually brought them there in about a year. That they ended up at the door of the Promised Land about 13 to 14 months from when they left Egypt. And this is what God says to them in Numbers chapter 13, starting in verse 1. It says this: the Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. So God is telling Moses, I'm giving you some land. It's yours, and it's incredible. And this is all available to you. Have you ever gotten news that just blows you away? Like, man, you got a new car, you got a new house. I've never gotten a new car or a new house, but something like that you're just like, man, this is such good news. And that's what this was. God was not saying, hey, you might get this land if you're good enough. He's not even saying, hey, if you're able to conquer it, then I'll give it to you. He's not saying, hey, if you perform well, show me if you can handle it. He's actually saying, I've given you this land. This is yours, and now go in and check it out. And see, there is this beautiful new reality that God is inviting the Israelites into. He's like, no more wandering in the desert. You're not going to be stuck eating this like manna that comes from heaven every morning. You're not going to be living in tents. You're going to have your own land, your own homes to call yours. You're not going to be walking through the desert all day long, all day night. This is yours here forever. Here's the thing. I don't know about you, but I live differently when I know something is mine and it's coming. Don't you? Because here's the thing, like Saturday, I have my tax appointment. Now, I know for some of you, your tax appointment's like, ugh, right? My tax appointment, because I put lots of money away for taxes, is always exciting because I know I'm getting money back, right? And how many of you have ever got, like, you go to do your taxes and you're like, oh, the rebate check is coming, right? The refund check is coming. There's a different way you live. Most of you just go blow it instantly, but there's a different way that you live. And you live differently when you're like, oh, my friend's coming in town, and I get to spend time with them in a few weeks or a few months. There's a different way that you live, right? You live differently when you know, like, there's a vacation coming. Like, I can handle a few more crazy months at work because there's that vacation coming. You live differently when you know something is coming that is yours in this moment. It changes how you view things when you've been promised something, when it's been bought and paid for, and it is inevitably on the horizon. So when God says, go and explore the land, he's more saying, hey, go check out the new digs, than he is like, we'll see if this happens. He's saying, look, I have provided this land for you. Go check it out. It is yours. It is available to you. So when God says this, should be this excitement that comes up within the Israelites. See, you explore the world differently when you know something has been promised to you than when you wander through life going, we'll see. See, this is not a we'll see moment. This was a it is yours moment. And so the Israelites send 12 men into this land, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's insane. At one point in the description of it, it says that they had grapes so big that they had to take them and put them on sticks, and 2 guys had to carry the sticks because of how big and how heavy they were. I mean, this was the promised land, literally, not even figuratively. This was the promised land. And so here they are in this space, and after they've explored this land, which God has said is yours, it's available to you. It's not even like a question. I've promised it to you. This is what they come back and say in Numbers chapter 13, starting in verse 26. It says, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community in Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land which you sent us, and it does. It flows with milk and honey. Here is the fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Enoch there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. See, here is the data that they all agreed upon about this land that they had been exploring. The land's incredible. They're like, it's flowing with milk and honey. Like this is legit. In other words, they're saying, this doesn't just have everything we need, it has more than everything we need, right? The fruit's insane. Check out the pomegranates, check out the grapes. We're going to have a giant fruit salad here, and they're loving it in the middle of this. They also saw, look, there's people there that are pretty powerful, and the city has some pretty strong walls connected to it, but these are the facts that they bring back to Moses, right? Now, how many of you recognize in life there's facts and there's data about what's going on in our life and what's taking place in our life, and then there's how we see the data and the facts? Those are 2 very different things, right? Because how many of you have ever been in a space where you can actually be looking at the exact same thing and 2 people can have very different experiences of the exact same data and facts, yes? Because this is what happens right after they discuss the data and facts. This is what it says. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. I love Caleb. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people.
They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they explored. They said that the land we explored devours all those living in it. All the people we saw there were giant sized. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Enoch came from Nephilim. And we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And we looked the same to them. See, it's interesting that two groups of people saw the same data but came back with very different experiences. 11 of them came back to say, there is no way we can take them. They're stronger than us. They devour everyone that's alive. They were huge. We were like grasshoppers. They saw us like grasshoppers. And then one guy comes back and says, let's take it. Let's go. It's ours. Let's go take the land that has been promised to us. What on earth is happening here? I mean, look, we've all been here, right? Where two people are looking at the exact same data and experiencing the same thing. I mean, how many of you have ever been to a party with a friend or a spouse, and you get in the car, and one of you is like, that party sucked, and the other person's like, that was banging, right? How many of you, like when you talk about your workplace, one of you is like, man, our boss is insane, they're a narcissist, and the other person, I don't know, I like them, I think they're pretty cool, right? Look, we can look at our president, and everyone has a very different experience with the same facts and data, don't we? So what gives here? What actually changes this in the midst of this? Why did one come back and say, let's take the land, it's ours, let's go? And why did 11 come back and say, there is no way that we can have this land that was promised to us? It's because 11 were not careful with their little eyes what they saw in this moment. See, Caleb was evaluating the giants through the lens of the promise that he had already been given. He was looking out at the giants through the lens, through the eyes of this promise, as if the land was already theirs and the giants were just part of the landscape. The giants were just a formality. They weren't a problem as much as just part of the facts that came with the land. And here's the thing, if giants were in the land, it wasn't a problem because the land had already been promised to them. It was already given to them. It was already their inheritance. They were already heirs. And so the giants didn't appear like something that they needed to stop with. It was just something they needed to press through in that moment. But here's the other thing is the 11 were evaluating the giants through the lens of their own capabilities and through their own circumstances. See, they said, we can't attack them. We're too weak. See, they're looking out at these giants through the lens of what they're capable of doing and not capable of doing in their own strength. Then they find themselves like, they're stronger than we are. They start comparing their capabilities to the capabilities of what's over there, the circumstance, the people, the situation there. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Notice the eyes that they're looking out through. They're evaluating how they are in light of their own capabilities, and it actually becomes an identity statement about who they are. See, it's not like, man, they look stronger, we look weaker. It was now suddenly, I'm a grasshopper. I'm small, I'm insignificant, I'm weak, they're going to crush me, I'm incapable. And then they find themselves saying, and we looked exactly the same to them. Now here's the thing, I'm assuming that these 11 didn't walk up to Mr. Giant, say, excuse me, Mr. Giant, could you evaluate my physical physique here for a moment? Yeah, you guys are grasshoppers, right? No, I don't think that actually happened. See, they actually started assuming what the giants thought about them. As they looked out at the world through their own eyes, they started making up stories about the circumstances that they found themselves in that weren't even based on data. That was just based on how they were seeing the circumstances in the moment. See, and they didn't doubt the land. They doubted who they were with God and what God was capable of and not capable of as they looked out at the circumstances in their lives. See, and I wonder for how many of us, if we were honest, we do the exact same thing. God comes to us and he says, here is a future that I am giving to you, that I have promised you. A future of freedom and of hope and of joy and of abundance and of love and of so much faith. A life that is meant to impact the world around you and that has been given to us. Not if you can perform good, then maybe you'll have it. Not if you're capable of handling this, then we'll see. Not if your capabilities are up to obtaining it, then you can have it. This is yours. And then God says, all right, go check it out. Go step into this life that I've called you to live. Go step into this future that I have bought for you and paid for you and promised you, and it is all yours right there. And we see the circumstances in front of us, and we immediately get intimidated. We immediately look at all the circumstances and the relationships and all the things that have to happen and all the perceived roadblocks that we have to press through, and we immediately go, no. It's way bigger than I am. That's beyond my capabilities. That's beyond my pay grade. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not capable of taking that life on. That's not for me. That might be for some other people who are stronger, but did you see the giants out there? I wonder for how many of us we look out at the giants in our life and we just immediately assume I'm not capable because we're looking out at it through the lens of our capabilities rather than through the lens of the promises. See, here is the thing. When God invites you into a future that he has for you, it will always feel intimidating. It will always feel bigger than you. There will never be a time where God invites you into a future that's like a unilateral move. He doesn't do that. He certainly won't invite you into a smaller life, so the only option is an upgrade. The only option is a future that when you look out at, you're going, that is amazing, and I have no idea how we're going to slay those giants. I have no idea how we're going to take this land. The land's incredible. This future's incredible. I have no idea. And so then we start making up all kinds of stories about who we are, and we make up all kinds of stories about what we're capable of and not capable of, and we make up stories about how other people see us. See, I wonder how many of us tell stories, well now everyone thinks I'm incompetent. Everyone thinks I'm not capable. Everyone thinks I'm weak and that I'm not really good at what I do. And so we start making up stories about even who we are based on what we think other people think we are. And then God finds himself inviting us into this space, and it's easy to look at ourselves and say, gosh, I feel as small as a grasshopper. Ever been there before? Where you just look out at this future that God has for you, and you're just like, I feel so small and incapable, and I have no idea how this is going to happen. And if you are not careful with your little eyes, what you see, you will start looking out at the future that God has already given to you through the lens of your own capabilities, and you will look at the giants in your life and assume that he has abandoned you or left you or made a mistake when it was already given to yours. The giants will be interpreted as a threat rather than an invitation into a possibility, and it will shut down the promised land that is literally right in front of you, not because God didn't want to hand it to you, but because you would only see it through the lens of what you were capable of, not through the lens of what was promised to you in those moments. So I wonder how many times we find ourselves saying, I'm not capable of having that conversation. That seems too big. That seems too risky. I don't think I'm capable of having. I'm not qualified for this opportunity, this door that's opening in front of me. I don't have the schooling. I don't have the education. I don't have the learning. I don't have the capabilities for that. This is not who I am. There are giants out there, and I just feel so small. And I'm sure people think that I'm small too. So why even take the land? Because I know how this is going to end. Matthew 6:22 through 23, Jesus addresses this very thing with us because he knew that we, not some of us, we would struggle with this. And he says this, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? See, here's what I'm going to assess. Is that the 11 who went into that promised land and looked at the giants and said, turn around and run, they didn't start seeing the giants just the moment when they entered into that land. They had been training themselves for years to see the world through a lens of fear. They had been training themselves for years that when they looked out at what God was calling them into, their first response was, I can't do that. I'm incapable. This is beyond my pay grade. This is so scary. I don't think I can do this. And so when they entered into that land, their eyes were already filled with darkness. Their eyes were already filled with hopelessness and with powerlessness, and their eyes were already informing them that the only thing that they could have in life is what they were capable of achieving and performing on their own. And so when they looked out at this land, of course, it appeared like an impossibility, like it appeared like there was so much scarcity in that. See, the question for you this morning is, how have you been training your eyes to see your world? Are you training your eyes to look out at the world and only see what you're capable of achieving and what you're capable of performing and what you're capable of doing? Are you training your eyes to prove stories about who you are and who you aren't and what others have said about you and what you think others have said about you? Or do you look out at the world through the lens of promise, knowing that the land has already been given to you, that's right in front of you? See, and when we look out at the world through this lens of darkness at times, when we look out at the world through our own capabilities, there are certain favorite places that we go to that are pretty predictable. See, because the 11, they actually couldn't just keep this to themselves. Notice what happens as the story continues in Numbers chapter 14, starting in verse 1. It says, "That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, 'If only we had died in Egypt or in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?' And they said to each other, 'We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt.'" Misery loves company, doesn't it? Have you ever noticed that when you feel intimidated by a circumstance or a situation that God has already promised you? Like when God's like, "Hey, I'm going to set you free from all this like relational chaos," or "I'd like to release you from all this bondage with your finances," or "I would like for you to step into this new space of courage and confidence." Have you noticed that we find ourselves there? We love to invite other people into our insecurities to confirm that we're right about our insecurities. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that we start collecting communities of people to prove our story right about ourselves? Because there's only one thing better than a pity party. It's a pity party with guests, isn't it? See, this moved from 11 people looking out at the world, this promised land, going, "Yeah, we can't take this, we're grasshoppers." They think we're grasshoppers, they kill everything in their path and all those things, to the entire city coming out and mourning, right? And they're not even mourning about the land. They're like, "They're gonna kill our kids and our wives, and God left us here to die, and who can send us back to Egypt," right? And so now the entire nation has been invited into seeing the world through this same lens. See, if you're not careful, you will be pulled into other people's dark thinking very quickly. And you will start agreeing with where other people have decided God is not big enough and God is not strong enough. And you will start pitying them and yourself because God doesn't clearly keep his promises. And an entire nation starts grumbling. I wonder how many times we've enrolled other people into our way of seeing things. You don't know how bad I have it and how awful it is, and my life always falls apart, and my wife and kids are probably going to be taken as plunder. All the things. And then we start enrolling people into our hopelessness. We're like, "This is really bad," right? You see it too, right? You see it, how bad it is. You see how awful my boss is and how awful my work is. You see how this can never happen for me. It can happen for other people, it can't happen for me, right? You see how this promise is like a pipe dream. Here, let me give you the reason. You agree, right? Because it's one thing to stand in our own insecurities. It's one thing to enroll a whole community of people around us who will stand with us as well, because we don't feel as alone in our insecurities. And it turns the news contagious about what takes place. See, it only requires a few people to see the world through a dark lens to impact an entire nation, as we currently see in our political and social climate. And when you're unwilling to step into the future boldly that God has called you into, there's really only one option.
because you can't stay in the present. The only option is to go back to the past of where you were, of where you had been, of where you had stepped into. See, this is another thing that happens when we're not careful with our little eyes, how we see, is that our eyes start looking backwards, but we start looking backwards with new lenses. See, the lenses will start rewriting the past, and it will make slavery look sexy. And that's where the Israelites found themselves. See, they had just escaped 400 years of slavery. They had just escaped 400 years of generations being owned by Egyptians. And then they had this miraculous intervention where God brings Moses back, and there's these 12 plagues, and they're set free. He parts the Red Sea. They walk through it. They wander through the wilderness for about 13 months. God provides everything they need for them in that moment. They find themselves here. God says, I've given you all the land, and now they find themselves saying, let's go back. And let's not just go back. Let's elect leaders to bring us back so we can assure that we go back in the promise and in the past. See, I wonder how many times we find ourselves there where we're on the edge of the promised land. We're on the edge of the future that God's called us into. And we look at the giants and it feels overwhelming. And so we back up and we enroll a bunch of people into our pity party. And then we say, let's go back and let's start repeating what has been. Because at least it's better than what's over there. Because I know this, I have no clue. And so we find ourselves repeating the same habits over and over and over again, not because we're crazy, because our eyes tell us that this is better than the promise over here. And so the second you get into that perfect new job and it starts to not feel as exciting anymore, you start saying, well, where I wasn't too bad. I know it was like a crazy work environment and stuff, but it wasn't that. Maybe it wouldn't be bad to unemploy. Maybe we should start looking for another job because this one's not good anymore. You start getting a little lonely after you've broken up with that person. And then you know where it's going, right? They weren't that crazy, right? Just a little crazy, right? Like they're manageable crazy, right? One night wouldn't hurt. Or you find that new church that's all nice and shiny, and then you get involved and you realize, oh, they're people too. And then you're like, well, maybe that other church looked a lot better back there that I was at. Let me find another place to go because this one doesn't look as good anymore to me. And so we find ourselves rewriting the past to make it more attractive so that we don't have to step into the future that seems uncertain in the moment. And when our eyes are full of darkness, it will make a promised land look like a threat, and it will make slavery look like salvation in the moment. And here's the beautiful thing, is that God looks at the Israelites in all of their insecurity, in all of their craziness around like, we can't do this, and God isn't who he says he is, and we're grasshoppers, and they think that we're grasshoppers, and let's go back after God did all this stuff for us. God actually says, I forgive you. And he says, and I will keep my promise because I am a God who only does that. You will have a promised land. It will be yours. So I will not renegotiate my promise with this, but he looks at this version of the Israelites, this generation of the Israelites, and he says, because of your eyes, your generation will not have access to this promised land anymore. Because of how you saw things, you will be unwilling to step into this promise. The funny thing is the Israelites do what most kids do when they're in trouble. And they said, we'll be good. We promised we'll be good, right? And God's like, nope, too late, right? He's like, nah, we're good. We're too late. We're too late for that. And so they find themselves saying, no, we'll be good now. We got it. We're clear. We're just kidding. We want the promised land. We'll take it. We'll take the giants. And so they decide now they're going to go
take the land after God has just told them not anymore. And the story continues in 1439. When Moses reported this all to the Israelites, they mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they set out to the highest point in the hill country, saying, "Now we're ready to go to the land the Lord has promised. Surely we have sinned." But Moses said, "Why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed. Do not go up, because the Lord is not with you. You will be defeated by your armies, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites will face you there because you have turned away from the Lord. He will not be with you, and you will fall by the sword." Nevertheless, in their presumption, they went up towards the highest point in the hill country through neither Moses nor the ark of the Lord's covenant moved from the camp. Then the Amalekites went, and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hamorah. See, they didn't move when God said go, but they ran when God said stop. And they were attacked and beaten down in the very land that God had promised them a few days ago, not because it wasn't theirs, but because they couldn't see it. See, I wonder how many men and women walked away from that battle where they were all attacked and they were all beaten on the ground, some of them dead. And they said, "See, we were right. God abandoned us. He left us. We were right about the giants. We were right. We were grasshoppers. They saw us like that. They destroyed everything in their sight. They were right. We were right." See, here's the crazy thing, is that you will eventually be right about whatever you see, I promise you. If you decide that you are going to look out at through the world through the lens of the promise that God has for you, you will be right about that, I promise you. If you look out at the world through the lens of your own capabilities and what you're capable of and not capable of, you will also be right about that. You get to be right either way. See, if we've trained ourselves to look out at the world through the lens about what we're capable of, it will always play out exactly the way you see it. If you decide, "I'm not capable, I don't have what it takes, and God's not going to come through," guess what? You will find yourself, "See, I told you so. And look, I told all these people, see, don't you see I was right? Don't you see I was right that God didn't show up? Don't you see I was right that he wasn't there? The world is such a dark place. I'm so incapable. The church is such a mess." And you get to be right. But that's all you'll have is your rightness. See, when we look out at the world through the lens of God's promise and through the lens of his provision, if we've trained ourselves to look out at the world through those eyes, it will also always play out exactly the way that he sees it in those moments. And because of this moment, where God was like, "Here's the promised land, it's yours," and because 11 came back and saw something different and enrolled a whole nation into the story of what they saw, the Israelites famously wandered for another 40 years in the desert because they were not careful with their little eyes what they saw in that moment. And every person who couldn't see it died in the wilderness. They never stepped foot into Canaan. They never got a taste of the grapes or the milk and the honey that was promised them from the beginning. See, they were delivered from Egypt in a night, but God took 40 years to deliver Egypt out of them. And see, that's the choice in front of you. God is like, "Hey, I have delivered you from your own insecurities and the chokehold of what you can do with your own power and your own strength. And you can certainly walk into that today because it is yours. Go check out your new digs." Or you can look out at it through the lens of, no, you don't understand how small I am and how incapable I am and how I'm not able to and how people aren't and how the church is and how the world is. And let me give you all the million excuses as to why this can't happen. See, eventually they did get the land because God keeps his promises, but it was their grandkids who got into the land because for the first generation, they could see it. It was the first generation that when they looked at the land, they didn't look at the giants and say, "We're not capable." They looked at the land and said, "Let's take it." And so God will always keep his promises, but you may not always get to be the benefactor of those promises, not based on him, but based on your eyes and how you're willing to see.
See, I wonder what God has placed in front of you right now. What promised land he has promised you right now. What area of your life he's like, hey, there's freedom available here right now. There is abundant joy that is yours, bought and paid for. There is hope and a future that is right here. There are relationships that are going to pour into your life. There is community that was designed to build you up. All of this is possible. It's right here. I've already paid for you. Will you check it out where God is inviting you to explore it right now? And where are you tempted to look out at it through your own eyes and say, no, you don't understand. It's too big. It's too hard. I'm just so small, and everyone else sees me as so small. And where have you enrolled everyone else into your story as well? Your spouse, your friends, your kids, as to what you're capable of and not capable of. But more importantly, how small has your God become in the process? See, you stand one decision away from the life that God has promised you. Not if you're good enough, not if you can behave your way into it, not if you're capable of taking it, has promised you. See, Israel did not wander in the desert for 40 years because God hid the land. On the contrary, it was right in front of them. He actually said, go check it out, it's yours. But they were lost because they believed a smaller story about who they were and who God was, and they were not careful with their little eyes how they saw the world around them. And so they saw giants instead of inheritance. They saw a threat instead of promise. They saw a past instead of this future that God had for them. And the wilderness was not where God sent them. It was where their eyes took them. So the choice is yours today. Will you look out at the future and the promised land that God has for you through the eyes of promise today? Or will you choose to look out at it through the lens of what you're incapable of or capable of? Either way, you will be right. And that will be your inheritance. Because you don't experience the life that God gives you. You experience the life that you can see. And that will be the future that you get to step into. Would you just bow your head and close your eyes for a moment? For those of you in the room who have a big promised land in front of you that may scare you, you may be looking out at the future going, I don't know how this is possible. I don't know how God's going to do this. I don't know. I can't even see a way out. But today, God is calling you to take the land, to explore the land. He's saying, hey, come check out your new digs. There's freedom and there's hope and there's joy available to you. And where have you been tempted to look out at it through the lens of your own capabilities? Today, would you just pause and invite the Spirit of God to give you new eyes? To look out at that promised land through the eyes of promise, that it's yours. It's bought and paid for, and God is saying, would you just step into it? I know there's giants, and I know you feel small, and I know it's scary, but would you be willing to step into that? Would you just ask him right now to change how you see? Because I guarantee that as he changes your eyes, you will see new. Because he is a God who has come, who has sacrificed everything on a cross and came back to life, so that you could confidently stand in the promise that's in front of you. And this morning, if you're here and you have not yet connected to Jesus, and you're like, man, I want this life. I want to live in promise. I want to
to not just rely on my own strength and my own power and what I see as possible and not possible. I want to step into relationship with Jesus, because that's the only way that you're going to ever step into this promised land. Today, he wants just to connect with you. And so if you're here today and you're ready to step into a relationship with Jesus, maybe for the first time or for the first time in a long time, would you just raise your hand? Just let me know. Hey, I want to step into a relationship with Jesus today. I want to connect to him, maybe for the first time or the first time in a long time. If you're online, you can just put Jesus in the chat. But I just want you to pray this very simple prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. Would you just pray that today? Jesus, I give you my life, and just hand it over to him. And if you made that prayer, I want you to go back to next step right after this, just to get more acquainted with what that means. Jesus, forgive us for the places that we have been invited into the promised land and responded back with every excuse under the sun about why it can't happen and why we're not and why you aren't and why others are. Today, would you open our eyes to see the promise that's in front of us, to see the future that's already ours, to boldly step in, that as giants are defeated and as lands are taken, God, that the world around us would know that you are the God who keeps his promises, not because of how capable we are, but because of how good you are in keeping your word. That our lives would be defined by the miraculous, that people would look at how we live and how we choose, and the only thing that would be able to explain it is that there is a God of promise who is moving behind them in power. So Jesus, we choose to take the land today, flowing with milk and honey. The giants, they're just a formality. So we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.